Welcome in the arena. My name is Allison Klein, and today I am joined by Lynn Comp, the head of the AI Center of Excellence at Intel. Lynn, it's so great to be back with you. How are you? And can you just share a little bit about yourself and the AI Center of Excellence for our audience?
Thank you, Allison. It's always great to be in the arena with you. Um, so I am the head of sales for the AI Center of Excellence at Intel, and the job is really split in two. One of them, I am an advocate between the businesses and our sellers for how do you actually talk about artificial intelligence solutions and workflows, and then where does Intel help solve problems so that our sellers understand better our end-to-end options, because we've got a lot from PC client to edge analytics through the data center up to the cloud. The other part of what I do is a lot of advocacy and dealing with partners who are trying to scale out these AI solutions really do meet the ideal of the democratization of AI, and it really is a solution for all of humanity.
Now, our topic today is agentic computing, which I was really looking forward to. I know you spend a lot of time with enterprises talking about where they are on their AI journeys. How are they adopting not just traditional ML, but ML model based AI implementation, but generative AI and now agentic computing? Are enterprises ready for what agentic AI will require? I think that's a great place to start the
Oh,
discussion.
yeah, I think that is such a brilliant start point because it starts with data. AI
Mhm.
starts with data. And we've been, since big data, on this data governance, data cleansing, data readiness, um, where your data repositories get data in the right place. Um, and it all starts with that. And we're still struggling with the same problems, quite frankly. Um, so you've got the ability to have structured databases that maintain a synchronization point, regardless of who's getting access. So the ETL, and, extract, transform, and load. The challenge that we have now is there's two different database constructs with things like agentic. It was a little simpler with just ML, and then you have LLMs where you've got the retrieval augmented generation or generative AI or RAG. Well, that's injecting data from a structured environment, and then you're using these new vector databases. And the challenge is structured databases are synced and vector databases are static. So then you layer on top of that agentic AI, which is really, I love the concept of agentic AI because it's find the right tool for the right job and then have the agent run it. Brilliant concept. The challenge is when you've got three agents that need the same data but sample it from different points, you can have complete disconnects between the agents who thought, oh, I'm working on the same root data, and then they discover something went really wrong. And as we all know, it's really difficult to debug AI-based systems at this point. So there's a lot of concern and really trying to increase the observability of these
Mhm.
agentic systems because we go all the way back to a 10-year data problem, and we haven't necessarily as an industry completely caught up with all of those systems.
I was working on image development on Mid-Journey last week, and I was thinking about this. I was thinking about the fact that I wanted to fine-tune this image, and Mid-Journey was having uh, a memory problem in
Mhm.
terms of the development of that image over multiple queries. And agentic computing just makes that more intense, given the fact that it is actually doing a multi-step process that can be very complex. Um, what does this mean about computational and infrastructure demands versus what we're working with current generation of LLMs?
Oh, it just exponentially blows the number of tokens getting passed back and forth. completely out of the water. It's like a 5 to 10x increase from what a lot of customers have told us. So you're talking east-west traffic. You're talking about agent-to-agent communication that needs to happen at times. Um, in terms of the compute requirements, I think some of that really comes down to what is the agent running? Like a simple calculation, probably don't want to have an LLM doing that because
Right.
you want deterministic as opposed to probabilistic. So some of those performance taxes that we had seen in the past get a little bit better. But the challenge really is how do you have 5 agents that potentially inject 0.01% errors, but then you multiply it over an entire workflow? How do you actually figure out where things went wrong and get that transparency and observability? And if multiple agents are calling an LLM, then on top of that, you have cost variability because the LLM API costs, they range from $4 to $4,000. Most of them are averaging around 25 to 30 bucks, but still, if you have 10 agents hitting an LLM simultaneously over one workflow, and then you need to run that workflow multiple times, how in the world would you optimize and do FinOps? And
Right.
where would you trace it? So there's a lot of questions, and all of that right now has caused a lot of enterprises to say, I'm not going to buy, I'm going to build. And so they end up having their own marketplaces internally that are employee generated.
That's fascinating. Now, Intel knows a little bit about modeling workload performance requirements. How do you view this widening gap with agentic AI, and what are you saying to enterprises that feel like they can't catch up?
Mm. Yeah, I think that a lot of them are looking at it from how do I protect my data and not have my data training something else? And there are some companies that have some good solutions, like they flush the cache out, or they have very private allocation to a very guarded part of Azure or a guarded part of AWS. So there's ways in which they can protect things. Um, and there are a number of enterprises that are SaaS only that are
Mhm.
really just looking and saying, well, I've moved everything into the cloud. I have to work in the cloud. And trying to navigate that has been challenging. So what they've given up in terms of responsibility to navigate owning systems and lifetime and maintaining those systems and all of the licenses that go with it, they now have to navigate with FinOps, transparency, and security in their new properties. So uh, we all saw this with cloud, though, right? I mean, you saw it.
Mhm.
Companies thought that, oh, I'm born in the cloud. I don't have to deal and have an IT department. And then they discovered companies like Snowflakes and Salesforce and everyone else, they all had people who had to manage the execution of cloud for their software. And I don't think it'll be any different. There's just no getting away from it.
Now, agentic AI brings some unique challenges from a standpoint of just data management, brings persistent context, memory and decision making into the mix. How do you look at the data structures and memory systems that will be required in enterprise environments to actually make this work?
It is going to be a huge challenge, to be honest. Now, there are companies and partners that I looked at and talked to that have the ability to look at your whole data property across an entire hybrid environment. I think now is the time that any enterprise that thinks I'm going to go do agentic long term, they really need to start looking at those data platforms. I mean, it's one of those areas where you need that one pane of glass to know what's happening.
Hmm.
Because how else are you going to trace what's going on with your data in the agentic system that also has its own probabilistic variability to it? So I think that those data management platforms, you're talking Nutanix or NetApp or something like that, Databricks, anything that can help you give that universal view, really important. And whether it's, what is it, data lakes, data warehouses, data lake houses, whatever is your flavor, you need to be able to look across all of that. Because otherwise there's just no way for your team to be able to have that observability and traceability. Beyond that, really, now is the time to start cleaning your data, folks. I had one very large financial institution talk to me about how their whole institution has been based on a bunch of acquisitions. And so in some cases, they're using AI to clean up old code, old data, and then update and modernize it because believe it or not, some of the people who wrote the code and installed that data, they're not in the workforce anymore. So
Mhm.
kind of using the tools of the trade to help yourself is, I think, really important. But again, these are internal tools and processes. They're not really even working with third parties yet.
Now, one of the things that I think about as you described, being on the cloud, bringing things on-prem, how are organizations tackling topics like locality, governance, um, tiering of data within these these distributed environments that are actually trying to tap data all the time from a distributed perspective? How do you manage that?
Boy, it's a really interesting topic because I'm working my way through an AI governance program right now. And just listening to what the recommendations are for building a governance team and who should be on the team and asking yourself the questions of how do you design it. If we're being honest, like no one's board of directors in the last 2 years was saying, what's your governance? They were asking, what are you doing with AI? And there was a great article that Wall Street Journal posted a couple days ago about Johnson and Johnson and their journey of we started with like 1,000 POCs and 1,000 flowers, and now we're down to 3 to 5 use cases. Matt Garman at AWS said the same thing recently as well. As they prune that, I think things get a little bit cleaner. Um, but yeah, it's a tough journey.
So I wrote an article last week about Synopsys's vision of delivering agentic computing for semiconductor design. And as somebody who has a common semiconductor heritage, you can imagine that my mind was blown when they started talking about fully autonomous agentic delivery of microprocessors. They're the most complex devices on the planet. What that tells me is that any enterprise workflow is going to be disrupted with agentic computing if it's brought to its full vision. How does an enterprise think about that paradigm shift of workflow differentiation with agents? And how do you see companies really that are foot forward approaching this in terms of the way they think about design of workforce in an agentic world?
Yeah. So I think that kind of an outside in view that's really interesting about the agentic workflow is if you think of it like, I think of it as function as a service, right? Or orchestrated workloads or containerization and container management. At least that's how my brain works, coming from more of a cloud background. And if you think about it from that perspective, I think that what they're going to end up finding is there's going to be very clear and hardened agents that are known good, that are basically working, and they are effectively the agent that wins the competition for the function that lays out semiconductors. The other thing that I've found that's really interesting is you can inject AI to try and do automation and workflows that exist, but the really powerful examples of applying AI come from, I call them needle in a haystack use cases, where
Mhm.
it's just so much data, a human cannot possibly see all the patterns, whether it's inspecting something visually and the AI agent can notice cracks in a pipe that a human just wouldn't notice, they wouldn't see it early enough. Another one that I really do like is place and route. Some of the FedEx and UPS logistics teams have used AI to figure out how to make their routes more efficient. If you think about semiconductors as being a place and route challenge, because we're in like trillions and billions of transistors at this point, it's at the point where it is beyond a human's ability to really comprehend what's the best layout. And I
Mhm.
think those outside in creative place and route problems are really a unique AI strength where our brains break down in terms of the complexity, but
Mhm.
it is completely ideal. And that's where a lot of those breakthroughs come through. The AI automation to replace humans, I'm not sure that at the end of the day, in 10 years, we're going to be saying that was the best AI use case compared to the needle in a haystack cases where it's not in human strength, but it is something AI can come up with that we just wouldn't see.
Now, I wanted to talk to you about the commercialization of this technology. Google Next had a really interesting development in where they showed their agent to agent platform. And I could actually start seeing the broad implementation of agentic computing utilizing this. They made it so much more accessible. Tell
Mhm.
me about how you thought about that. I'm sure you saw that.
Mhm.
What do you think about that? And how do you think it's going to spur more organizations taking advantage of these powerful tools?
Well, interoperability is absolutely critical to being able to take advantage of any new technology. And especially if you wanted to have a healthy startup ecosystem as opposed to AI is just an extension of the consolidation of hyperscale cloud. Which I think we're all hoping for. We want those creative solutions, as do the hyperscalers. They want those landing on top of themselves because the SaaS ecosystem has been really healthy for them. So the agent to agent or Anthropic's MCP protocol, all of those are absolutely necessary to have an ecosystem as opposed to something that is more of a lock-in first party property. And if you view an agent as more of a SaaS and a function as a service, there's no way you could have an agentic ecosystem with best of breed unless you've got agent to agent protocol from Google or the Anthropic capability. What you end up with instead is a default of this is how Amazon does storage, or this is how Azure does Office and or Copilot. And you're just not going to get the same ecosystem that way. So that is necessary first step. After that comes commercialization, because there's not really an agent marketplace. And so the commercialization of, are you paying per use? Are you paying for time of use? Are you paying for specific number of users over a time period? That's all something that's a work in progress. And in fact, when I spoke to a number of ISVs at Intel Vision, my comment to them is if you want to move enterprises from build to buy, and they really would prefer to buy, we've got to get the interoperability and we've got to get the commercialization. And with that comes observability so that you can have a FinOps capability, where you know what you're going to be spending, because the per use implementation of an agent doesn't really give you an idea of if you have 500 support engineers, how many times are they going to use it per day, per month? You can't budget unless you know that.
When you think about sitting in an enterprise today and you think about the end of the year, what would you tell somebody about what their organization should get their arms around with agentic computing? How much do you think this is going to be driven by IT versus line of business? And what should a successful path for 2025 look like for any organization?
Well, there's two IT groups that I've talked to recently and completely totally in different industries. One was manufacturing and one was financials. And it was really fascinating because um, the line of business in IT support, it follows something that is a common meme called the toddler rules of possession, where if your line of business, it's yours if it looked like yours, it's yours if your business was mission critical and you had to do it yourself, and you get out the credit cards and it's just a one-time use. And then at the very bottom, the last toddler rules of possession is if it's broken, it's yours. IT knows that's coming. And
Yes.
so a lot of the really creative IT people who have been around the block a time or two have effectively created their own internal marketplaces. And so
Yeah.
that way, they've got a foundational layer of a GPT that lets them swap out the models so they can support any model that a customer would like. So you can have 4 different models in some cases, depending on your preference. And then on top of that, there's an agent marketplace that's internal so that all of the energy around using agents is kept on that platform so that when line of business decides, oh, it's broken, it's yours, Intel IT or some of the other IT departments have the ability to say, all right, it's at least been well managed. And in the case of Intel, there's like 400 agents on a beta marketplace. And there's something like 4,000 in the works where people are developing it for themselves, but they're a little insecure that they might get judged about, how cool their agent is. So there's been a lot of uptake on it, and it's been a really clever way to channel all of the energy. People want to use AI desperately. They have a way to do it.
Now let's take a look more macro. Space is moving where I talked to you one week and it's a completely different conversation than the one we had the last week. But I'm going to ask you an impossible question, which is how do you see this space evolving over the next 12 to 18 months? And what are you most excited to see, both from a standpoint of the technology industry making advancements and enterprise and even just individuals like you and me adopting the technology?
Well, first of all, for individuals, somebody who's really great at user experience is going to come in and make this a lot easier to work with. There's so many advertorials of use AI now, top 15 tools, pay for my course and then you can make millions or something. And they're still not really easy to work with. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's still a lot of handcrafting. It feels like the early days of the internet in some ways. And so someone's going to get the UX really screaming easy to use. We'll have an iPhone moment, but with some of these AI tools, and then it's off to the races for everybody. For enterprises and for more business users, there's a lot that needs to be done around data. Just for the next 12 to 18 months, if you do nothing else, work on your data pipelines and data architectures, because it's that ounce of prevention is better than a pound of a cure. Just get the data right, and then you'll have so much flexibility on what AI can be best used in an agentic system. You're not locked into natural language processing or machine learning. You can use it all. Just do the right agent for the right function and have the ability to build those workflows quickly. So I think it'll get quickly to something that looks a little bit more like drag and drop. Um, and then there's going to be a lot more observability that needs to happen. I'm already seeing support bot accidents where they fired their customers by accident. There's also examples where tokens have been exposed by accident, examples where someone's overspent. I actually asked a hyperscaler yesterday, what are you doing in case some of your run fast and break things, what if they run through a plate glass window and spend $2 million on your property instead of 2,000? How are you guys giving some guardrails? And so there's going to be a lot of that, I think, where people realize, oh, it's great if you have an accidental $2 million bill unless you can't pay it. So that's what I see happening over the next 18 months is a digestion period where people like Johnson and Johnson in the Wall Street Journal article, they realize these are the things that we're going to focus on. We're going to make these great. And then we'll learn from that, and then we'll go on to the next function.
I can't wait to see it. I think this is such an exciting time to be in tech. And, I think that it's going to be so great to see what this allows from every single bank business function.
Yeah.
I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Um, Lynn, final question for you before we go. Where can folks continue the conversation and many others with you around the topic of AI?
So the best place to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. I'm just Lynn Comp. So you can just find me there, message me. I am on consistently because I found some of the best places to get AI news is off of LinkedIn, and it gives you a really good balanced perspective as long as you seek it out. So check me out on LinkedIn. I just have a couple blogs that posted this week. One of them was Agentic AI, and one of them was on scaling AI, which are both topics we've covered today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the time today. It was so much fun.
Thank you, Allison.